And for anybody that is, in addiction or recovery, I want to make it clear too, everybody's got a different path.
Welcome to Superpower with Kristine Milkovich, the podcast where we help you unleash your inner hero. Whether you're a change maker, a trailblazer, or just looking to level up, this is the space to uncover your unique superpower and transform it into unstoppable momentum. Join me as we dive deep with inspiring guests sharing their game-changing insights, empowering us all to be the hero of our own stories. Get ready to embrace your deepest purpose, own your power, and change the world one bold move at a time. In episode 5, our guest Jonathan Wells shares some of his life experiences being the son of a music minister, having a mother that was a beauty queen, and how he turned to drugs and alcohol while coping with being gay in a conservative religious household. Good morning and welcome to episode 5 of Superpower. This is a very, very exciting Seattle morning. We have an amazing guest on. He's a personal friend. He's a personal co-human in this world and life that we're all walking through and navigating. But professionally, he's got some really, professionally and personally, some pretty cool things to share that I know I'm excited to uncover and learn more about. He is in the HR change management professional lane and also has had some pretty significant discoveries at this phase of life around some key things and topics that I believe will shed some inspiration and some discovery and some light and some learning for not only myself, but our listeners. So, without further ado, Jonathan, welcome to Superpower.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I know that time is precious and we're all working to manage it to the best of our ability. So I always want to lead with thank you for your time. I know you could be a lot of other places on this Friday morning. So appreciate you. So, Jonathan, when we start these episodes, for one, folks that are down the street here in Seattle, maybe even in the community I live, Burien, or sitting in, on First Avenue, or in Southern California where you live and hail from. I always want to lead with just giving them a little bit of a 1, 2, 3 kind of an arc of, where do you live? Tell us a little bit about your lifestyle. Do you have a spouse? Do you have pets? And just give us a little bit of a framework about your background in your life. And then we'll kind of dig into the juicy stuff after that.
So, yeah, I currently live in Orange County, California, specifically Anaheim Hills. I am married. Have a husband, Brian. We've been married we've been together since 2007. We were married in 2014. How many years is that now? I start to lose track when it's about
It's like,
17, something like that.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but yes, and so we have two Yorkies, a little Levon and a little Saffron, and there are our babies and our children, so they're part of the
The
family.
Instagram photos, Jonathan, bananas. Like award winning. Your ability to dress and put
Oh, yeah.
your dogs in characters, which we're going to get to a little bit about that in you and what that is like in your background. But man, they're cute. Anyway, just had to
W-
share.
No, thank you. They hate the costumes. I get the
Well, of course they
costumes,
do.
and I put them on for the pictures, and then they basically take them right back off
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're looking
They're
at me
like,
like,
Dad, I
what?
hate you right now.
Right? What did I do wrong? Why am I wearing this? So yeah, so I live in Orange County. I haven't been there all my life. So I grew up in South Carolina, and I am the son of a music minister and a beauty pageant queen, who was also an entertainer and singer.
That sounds like a Hollywood film title. Like what a
Something like that.
minister singer and a beauty queen mom. That's just there's a lot. I bet there's a lot there.
There's a lot, yeah. So I have one older brother, and so it was the four of us growing up for a period of time, before my parents split a little bit later. But everything you're growing up, and we can dive into some maybe the more specifics later. But lots of appearances, lots of flashy showmanship around how we were brought up, and that's kind of what led me to want to go into acting as a career later on down the road. So which of course that's since changed. But yeah, so grew up in South Carolina, went to school in Missouri, went to a very it was an evangelical Christian school that did have a theater program, so that was a score for me. As a, I was fine with it as long as they had where I could study theater. And then so I was in Missouri for about 4 years studying, and then once I graduated, I moved to California, and I've been kind of all over the place since then. I've lived in Los Angeles, I've lived in San Francisco. I moved back home to South Carolina for a while, and we can get into more detail on why I did. But lots of ups and downs through my life, and probably the biggest thing is that and we'll talk about this as well. I kind of went into a very dark place at a period of my time in my life, and then was able to kind of rebuild my life from there. And that's I think what we're talking about today, which is my superpower. Yeah,
Yes, you
yeah.
have a few, but I want to go back just a little bit. So, we could do 5 podcasts certainly on this particular topic of how our families of origin, or certainly they could be chosen family, but the
Mhm,
families, the environments, the culture, the lifestyle of where we were reared up, brought up, just like you said, as a
mhm,
younger person, as a kiddo. I'd love to hear a little bit more because I also, it's always very exciting to learn and identify things that I have in common, be it through actual experience with my guests or parts of the country or cultural things. And I start going, wow, I can really relate to that. I can see myself through that person's lens or a part of myself. And I also grew up in a fundamentalist Baptist background
mhm,
environment. I went
mhm,
to private Christian school and we went to church on Sunday morning, Sunday
mhm,
night, and Wednesday
mhm,
Bible study. And the
mhm,
reason I'm sharing that for you, Jonathan, and for the listeners that maybe didn't know that about my background is, there's a lot to unpack there and it's not all
mhm,
bad. I'm not here bashing religion. I have very, very deep seated spiritual beliefs, and one could
mhm,
even say they're religious beliefs. But in the South, I'm going to go back. You're letting us know here you were, and I'd love to hear more about that. This young developing man
mhm,
and a young developing gay man.
mhm.
And, there must have been some experiences and forks in the road where being in an environment like that had its really difficult times. So, is there, some key things that you would love to share maybe with others that are going through that, other listeners that have faced maybe some of those struggles and certainly wins on the end in regards to that?
Yeah, so as you touched on, and I'm sure maybe you kind of can relate to a lot of what I'm about to say, but growing up, I knew that I was much different than the people around me, or at least that's the way I perceived it. I'm sure there were other people that were similar to where like me, that were gay, but nobody really talked about it. And at a very early age, I didn't know what gay was, but I knew that not only was I different, but I had different likes and desires, and so I always felt out of place. I never felt really like I belonged, which was one of the reasons why. And sometimes maybe it's a blessing and a curse, but having a showmanship family, I was able to kind of hide behind a lot of that showiness, kind of become someone else. And that's
Mm,
why acting was so appealing to me, because I was afraid people would find out who I really was.
mm,
And that would be a problem for me. It was really
right.
scary. And I really didn't even know completely who I was, because I hadn't been
You were a
modeled.
kiddo.
And
Yeah.
I hadn't had a model of good, strong, normal, whatever you want to call it, gay men or women, and that just wasn't something that was available to me. And so going through, you could say that it was a strict Christian home. I didn't realize that until later, when I moved out in the world and realized how sheltered I was. And again, not bashing religion at
Hmm.
all. I
Sure.
don't. I am not a religious person anymore, but yes, it was Sunday school. It was a church all day on Sunday, and
Yeah.
because my dad was a minister, we were at church every day of the week
Yeah.
for the
I
most
mean,
part.
that was his actual career or his
That was his
community job.
career.
Sure.
Yeah, he was there more than he was home anyway. So.
Yeah, right. I just want to parlay into something that you have said. Well, let me back up. So, as you know, Jonathan, and anybody listening to this episode, I'm just getting started here. Superpower is a new podcast. And again, I it is a tremendous honor that you're giving me an hour of your time, A, but B, that you're being vulnerable and you're being open and having transparency and allowing me to dive in with you here. And so that being said, already we're only on episode 5, and every single guest in their way, one way or another, have said, I just feel like I didn't fit in. I just kind of knew I was different.
Mhm.
And that's not a LGBTQ plus conversation. That's a humanity conversation,
Mhm.
especially when you're coming of age, right? I mean, it can certainly go into sexuality and that can be a whole litany of topics. But you said something, actually, I think it was 3 times. I know it's pretty darn important, is that you having your word was showy, kind of, presence,
Mhm.
when we think of a minister or being, a beacon of the community, when we think of a beauty queen, we think of looking a certain way, having certain posture, maybe
Mhm.
talking in a certain way. And it's
Right.
just interesting if you could dive in a little bit deeper of how, as a younger person coming of age, figuring yourself out, not sure where to place all of that, that acting and, you kind of said, like, sort of, first of all, figuring out who I was, but then almost figuring out how you could hide it in a character, right? In a
Mhm.
performance, whether that be theater or dance or so. Maybe just go a little bit deeper on what did that look like? I mean, did you join like the dance club and you said there was a theater department and
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bottom line is the show must go on. I mean,
right?
that was pretty much, it was an, unsaid
The
motto, I
mantra in
think,
your
and
home.
oh, yeah, and it was always about appearances. It wasn't what we could be falling apart completely
Mm,
at home, but we could not let other people know that. I mean, it was
right.
all about what it looked like and what was perceived from the outside.
Mm. You learned that at a really young age, Jonathan.
I did,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you, just to dive into that a little bit more, my mother she was diagnosed bipolar when I was younger, and she had, really huge mood swings, and it was really difficult for her. And back in that time, modern medicine was still kind of, putting, wrapping the head around what that looks like and how do we manage that. And mental health was not talked about as much in that time, and so that was one of those things that we had to keep very secret and we didn't talk about. And
Mm,
the fact that she had to go into treatment centers to get help, that was something that we had to do everything we could to keep people from knowing about that. And so that's kind of giving you that piece, and that was what was modeled to me. And so, but more and more I found the happy place and hiding behind those characters. Ironically, though, even though I was drawn to comedy with my characters, a lot of times I ended up playing the sad, kind of dark character
interesting.
in a theater show. And so, but I kind of found a lot of kind of weird comfort, I guess, in that as well. So yes, I was in college, and both in college and high school I was in chorus, and I sang and danced, took dance classes. I also was in acting. I throughout my dad being a minister, we had a larger church. He put on large production musicals. We would do
Okay.
like a Scrooge type, the Gospel according to Scrooge, and we would wear full period costumes, and it was kind of like a Broadway
Like
show.
full legit. Like
Hmm.
you definitely were acting and
Yeah.
performing. Yeah.
Yeah, as a kid, yeah, all the
Wow.
way up. Mhm.
There's a piece of that, just, even if you're a kiddo or an adult that doesn't go into acting and performance and music, I think just that childlike spirit, it's sort of like what kid doesn't love to, be into the dressing up and, putting on the
Mhm.
makeup or some
Yeah,
kind of
right.
fanfare. So I'm sure there was so much of that, to your point, that was really fun and
Yeah.
exciting and like a really cool, admirable piece of your childhood. So, knowing then, taking us kind of on this timeline journey, did your acting and performances, commercials, maybe a speaking piece, like tell us a little bit, because I'm going to go back to HR and some things that I want to learn from
Mhm.
you about that world. But as far as performances, because here's the thing, nobody's going to see this. It's not going on my YouTube. I can promise you that. It's for my private phone and eyes only. But I might have a video of you
Oh.
doing the most epic, freaking epic Britney Spears "Hit Me Baby One More Time" dance off. in my wife's prior old apartment when I first met you.
Wow.
It is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, forget the Golden Globes, Demi Moore, like, she got nothing on this. Anyway, so knowing that you're really good at it. I mean, respectfully, I've only known you on paper 11 years, and of course in community and friendship, we have deepened that, and I look forward to many more years of it. But you're good. You're a good dancer, like really good. And I've never heard you sing and I've never seen you act, but
Mm.
when you were in that world, and we'll get to kind of drugs and alcohol and addiction in a minute, but did it bring you joy? Did it light you up? Because you're sure good at it. And it looks like you're having fun when I watch that video.
Oh yeah, no, I loved it. Listen, what's funny about that, funny not funny, I guess, is there was a period of time when I was out of work, and I had a little extra time on my hands besides looking
You
for a
got to
job.
hone those Britney skills.
Oh yeah, I was going on and like finding old YouTube videos and things of her doing the dances, and I
Yeah.
learned like every single move just because I
It's
thought it was really fun. And then
flawless, by the
then
way.
it just became kind of this thing where we'd be at parties and I would have a little too much to
I
drink, and
got
then
you.
someone would say,
Yeah.
"Why
Your
why don't
hubby
you do
might
the
be like,
Britney?"
Jonathan, bring out the Britney routine.
Yeah,
That's a real crowd pleaser,
yeah.
by the way,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
alcohol or not,
yeah, yeah.
as you're
So
rolling your eyes at me.
well, no, it was fun at the time. Yeah, that was a lot of
Yeah,
fun. And
yeah.
it's still yeah, I still kinda I'll cut a move every now and again, but
Well, my belief is everything is in the order it's supposed to, right? Nothing is by mistake. It's all
Mhm,
by, to be woo woo,
mhm,
the universe plan and our life experiences. They go as they go, and we learn as we learn, and we fall down as we fall down.
mhm,
But reading a little bit more about the HR career, the HR environment, I've never directly worked in HR, but I've built a small real estate team, and I've been hired for jobs where I had to meet with the HR head, the HR team. So I certainly can respect and honor and understand what human resources is intended to be. But tell me a little bit about, kind of going from like your love for performance and character development and dressing up and singing and dancing. How do you sprinkle that piece of Jonathan that is just in, I always call it our little life particles. You grew up in an environment where it was harnessed and nurtured, hence the preacher performing and the beauty queen mom. But I'm sure if you didn't, that's just, it would have been a part of you because it's part of who you are and something you love to do. So how do you bring that piece of Jonathan to HR, to process management, people management, system strategies? Tell me a little. I know we talked offline on the phone about that
mhm,
cool thing of like you can bring those creative pieces to every career that you have. So what does that look
mhm.
like for you?
Yeah, so and I think, the journey to getting there is important too, and I don't know how much you wanna dive into that, I'll let you,
Go,
decide.
please dive, go deep.
Okay, if you wanna start there, then
You're like, if you want to go there.
if you wanna go there, then here we go. So, like I said, studied acting. Acting is, fantastic, I loved it, and I loved film more than anything. I didn't really wanna do live theater, I wanted to be in movie town. So when I graduated from college, I moved directly to Los Angeles. I mean, I literally the next day after graduating, I got in my car and drove to LA.
Wow, you were clear.
I
that's
was
that's
clear.
like I'm on a
Well, I knew if I
mission.
went home, I would never leave.
Yeah,
Right.
you had two
So,
choices.
yeah. Yep. Yeah. I was in the middle of the country in Missouri. I could go one way or the other. So I chose Los Angeles for I will say, about 5 years there. I got into acting class there as well. So I had already had a degree in theater, but I wanted to go, further and diving into that. I became assistant director, Larry Moss Studios, back in maybe 2001 in Santa Monica. And we did a lot of really cool work there. But during that time, I was also finally kind of coming out and realizing, really becoming who I was meant to be, but kind of reckoning with the fact that, I was either going to live this life in the closet and just wilt away and die, or I was going to live as I was meant to live. And so during that time, I kind of realized that I didn't, because I was becoming who I wanted to be and I could be myself, the need to act kind of fell away.
Hmm.
And my desire to act wasn't as strong either. And it was kind of a direct correlation. So I kind of didn't know what to do at that point. I mean, I was
Right.
learning who I was. I was, but during that time, everything was flashy and fun in the gay community, and I got kind of sucked into
Mm,
all the glitz and the glamour of that. And in doing so, I also started dabbling in drugs and areas that I really did not ever see myself going, but I wasn't afraid of it, so I
yeah.
just dove
Yeah.
in.
You were experimental at
I was
first and
experimental,
open.
and a lot of it too was trying to kind of, working through that. It didn't just happen overnight that I accepted myself. I had to really kind of reckon with the fact that there was a world out there that, just kind of a lot of people just hated me just for who I was,
Mm,
just for being gay. And so that was a really difficult thing to manage in my head. And so it was easier
hmm.
for me to kind of bury all of that and drugs and fun at the time.
So
And so it became
the
not fun.
numbing, the
The
numbing
numbing.
of it's so
Right.
painful, I can't bear it, so I'm gonna numb it with drugs and
Yeah.
alcohol to manage
Exactly.
through it. Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So I did that for a number of years, and I'll tell you the lowest point in that particular era was living. I was homeless.
Mm.
I actually lived on the streets in LA. I had a car, so I would sleep in my car during that time. And this was maybe for a period of 3 or 4 months, but I would rather stay high
Mhm.
and live, just barely making it than to admit defeat in a way and go back home and ask for help.
Okay.
Um, and so it took a lot for me to finally get there, but I realized, I was going to die if I continued doing this, and it wasn't working out. So I did eventually have to ask for help and to go home. And so, luckily, with the privilege that I was born with, I did have two parents that still loved me and were able to take me in. My dad conditionally, my mom unconditionally, which was cool, but that's a different story. But I was able to get back on my feet.
Yeah.
But through a period of kind of rebuilding, and I met my husband during that time as well. Moved to San Francisco, and when I moved there, that's when I started to I went into finance first. And by
Mhm.
way of finance and working in payroll, I was able to be introduced to the human resources world. And that is where I realized for the first time that I could do something that would allow me to make a living,
Yeah.
but also hone my skills that I had learned and pull some of that acting piece in, right? The theater. And I'll tell you, I'll be specific about that. What I loved the most and what I still continue to love the most about HR is the people aspect of it. The employee relations. A lot of times, HR people don't want to really tackle it because it's messy, and there's a lot of work to be done there, and it's always case by case basis with people
Sure.
that are coming in. It's not a cut and dry black and white situation,
Yeah.
so you really have to investigate and really work with people to help them where they are, and whatever the situation is. But the acting piece of that is that one of my top strengths is empathy, and
Mm.
that's something that I learned through acting. When learning a character, you really dive into who that person is, listen to go through their thought process, why they made these decisions, why they chose to do the things that they did, and maybe not completely agree with it. Maybe you do wholeheartedly agree with it, but really understanding it and
Mhm.
understanding why they made the decisions that they made. And that has been for me a real strength to be able to relate and to make solid decisions in the HR community and the HR profession when dealing with employee relations. So that's how that's kind of, that piece has been the strongest correlation, I would say, from the acting theater world to HR. Besides that, HR does a lot of showmanship type things as well. We do a lot of events and things like that and fun
There's
stuff.
some,
So
like, kissing
yeah,
the babies and right,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
networking and being
right.
able to be warm and
Yes,
sincere and, I mean, at
yeah,
its finest and, build
yeah,
you just said it, building it's a tool for building trusting relationships at the end of the
hmm,
day, yeah.
yeah,
I love how you kind of just parceled that out. Like, how do we take, when we're getting some life experience under our belt? We
hmm.
don't have to say our ages, or we can, not hiding that certainly on this show. But it's really, when we talked on some phone calls, it's, just those building blocks of maturing, getting more emotional intelligence, or at least that's the goal, with the weeks and months and years at Mount, and taking all that good stuff that's in your tool bag is
Mhm.
really what I'm hearing you say. And how can I translate that to my career? You touched on a couple other things. I would love to hear your point of view, because part of what you shared in your entertainment life, and you didn't say this, I'm just asking you if it's a little bit, you said you kind of like had to let that go. I'm not saying like give up that dream, but like I'm sort of hearing like maybe ego and not you, like just as humans. I think it's sometimes we get so, what's the word? Like hell bent on like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be this person. I'm going to have this career. This is what success is going to look like. We've talked about that on this show in some prior episodes. And tell me a little bit about how you like shed that, I'm not going to stay in acting, or maybe I'm not going to be a Hollywood film actor. And that's okay, because the things I'm really great at and I love and that make me special and unique, I'm bringing to the table. I'm serving
Mhm.
it up every day. I'm still Jonathan.
Yeah.
How did you kind of work through some of that? Because I think that's a very real thing that a lot of people walk through
Yeah.
and maybe even struggle with.
Well, I'm just going to be completely just upfront here. After being in Los Angeles, doing the whole acting thing, there was, a lot of what I thought it was not. And
Ah,
you hear the things about, that
the
it's
veil had been removed.
right, exactly. There's a real ugly side to it, but there's a really beautiful side to it as well. The ugly
Mhm,
side though was that it really was being in the right place at the right time, getting the
mhm.
right break. I worked as a waiter for years with other people who were acting, and some of them were my age now or older, and they were still waiting for their big break.
Ugh,
And I was looking at that, going, I don't think I'm,
you didn't
I mean,
know, you didn't wanna get on that train.
I didn't. But the other thing is that if the desire was strong enough, I would have continued, right?
Sure,
But what
sure.
happened was when I started, like I said earlier, when I became okay with being who I was and finding myself, that desire to act went away. So that kind of, all of a sudden, things just changed for me completely. My dreams changed. So
Mhm.
when I tell people the story of I used to be an actor and I'm no longer doing that, people think it's a sad story of I didn't make it. But for me, it wasn't that at all. It was a complete change. It was like, I don't want to do that anymore, and I'm okay with it, and
Yeah,
I'm really glad that I had that experience,
sure.
right?
It's coming from a place of empowerment, right?
Mhm.
Not being a victim to something not
Yeah.
working out. It's you saying, "That didn't work for me anymore. So guess
Yeah.
what? I
Yeah.
changed it. I did something different," right? I think that's a
Right.
real important piece of what you just said.
Yeah, and there's still a piece of that. I mean, I love movies. I'm still a huge movie buff. I love to go and really dive in. I love seeing great acting, and part of me says, maybe I should have been a film critic, because I could definitely write on what I see. But I love it. That's kind of a hobby, a pastime for me. But it's
Yeah.
not what I want to do to make me happy to be who I want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just share really quick for the listeners, when you were hosting my wife, Chris, and I at your home, you and your husband, Brian, in
Yeah.
California for a visit. Man, yes. I mean, you could be on any published and be on any TV show, because I was witness to your sort of your film credit, who you thought was going to get the Oscar or the Golden Globe, and why, and what film was launching. And oh my gosh. By the way, have you seen The Substance with Demi Moore?
Yes, it's one of my favorite
Oh,
movies of the year.
I
So
about to
good.
watch it tonight for the 3rd time. Like,
Oh, the
and
third
and
time.
the reason is there's so
Wow.
much to unpack. Talk about life
Oh, there
lessons,
is.
and
Oh,
whew,
yeah.
anyway, that's another podcast, but we'll
Oh,
have
yeah.
you back on to review,
Yeah.
your Oscar picks with Jonathan Wells.
Yeah.
Seriously, I will be asking you
Okay.
back for that. That would be really, really fun.
Oh, that'd be
But
cool. Thanks.
you touched on something. It's a piece that I'm starting to have the great fortune to put my toe in, dare I say this much, in my career lane, in sort of being published or being asked to be a speaker, or somebody thinks that you're good enough at your lane, and you have some skill excellence doing A, B, or C. So I'm relating to this in a minute. I did some research on you, because that's part of my job as a podcast curator, is to figure out what I don't know about you and ask you about it, so we can take some of your knowledge and inspiration. And one of them is, last year you were published. You were in an article, and if I'm getting this right, was it from the Where Malcolm Company is.
Where
Do I have
Malcolm.
that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
researched that and I read it and I looked at it and I saw it
Nice.
on your LinkedIn. And I'm bringing it up because that's just really, well, for one, it's interesting, right? You were called upon in your profession and
Hmm.
in your arena, and you
Yeah.
partnered up with someone and you
Yeah.
shared some thoughts and feelings around your career. And tell us a little bit about, certainly it could be that article. I'd love to hear more about it, but that is another way that you translate your creativity, right? Your writing brain, your strategy brain. So talk to me a little bit about that and how that came up.
Yeah, in HR, there are one of the things that I wanted to do because I didn't go to school for human resources. I didn't have that degree, which, as you know, a lot of people go
I
to
don't
school
have
for
one.
something completely
and I
different than what
and
they're
I
actually doing.
appreciate people that do. I very much honor it, but I hear what you're saying. Yes, I
But
do
I
not
knew
have a
that.
real estate degree. Nope, I
Mm,
don't.
yeah, right. So I mean, and so, but I'm good at what I do, and the reason why is because I really dove into it, and I did go. I actually got the Society of Human Resources senior level credential, their certification. Lots of studying, took classes, took I think it's a 4-hour exam. It is very difficult to pass. I did that. I also got another, very prestigious, from HRCI, the Senior Professional in Human Resources. But I got both of those certifications to kind of back up my knowledge and also help fill in the gaps for any areas that I might be lacking in. But
Sure.
with doing that, that opened me up to have that option to start writing, and actually come from a place of knowledge, right? And so I had a mentor at the time, where Malcolm, there was a mentorship program, and she was a writer. She did a lot of writing, and she said, "I want you to help me with this new piece." And it was exciting because at that time, especially, we were just coming out of the COVID pandemic, and the question that this article is asking is, has the workplace changed? Does it make sense for, all for our work week? What does it look like now? Do we still do a 40-hour, 5-day a week in the office atmosphere, or does it need to be different now? Because there's a big conversation about that, and a lot
Hot
of
topic, right,
large
Jonathan? Yeah.
companies are pushing people to come back into the office because they feel like that is the way that you get work done. But studies have been shown that that doesn't necessarily make the workers better or do their jobs better.
Right. There's a
They're not.
flip side to that story, right?
Yeah, and
That's
so it really dove into that piece, and
yeah.
that was really fun to do. And I'm so privileged to have that opportunity. I'd love to write with Cynthia again. That
Mm.
was Cynthia Malota as my mentor. But yeah, I just haven't had the time to get around to that again. But I'd like to do that in the future.
That's so, so cool. And,
Yeah.
that's where things like LinkedIn and these platforms are a tool, right? I mean, they are a place to showcase what you know and who your colleagues are and maybe what your contributions have been and what you can put out, out certainly in your career, but out into the world.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go back as we start to slowly wind down here. And, you'll take this where you're comfortable taking it. When you were working through some of the alcohol and drug addiction that
Mhm.
you were met with, how, like, your husband, your community, did everything sort of have to get compartmentalized for you to focus on being well and being focused on the pain and the hurt and the shame and the things that I can only imagine you went through as you were healing and uncovering, how you got there and
Mhm.
how the heck you're going to get out.
Mhm.
I just can imagine for myself and my own struggles and things I've gone through in my own life, but any of our listeners that are finding themselves in that space, what did that look like for you? Were you able to still be very immersive in the life that you built and knew, or did you kind of have to sort of completely pull out of it
Mm.
to get through that time? If you're willing to share any of that, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I think it's important to know that. So, I touched on earlier that I had a real, and it was a drug addiction. And specifically, I'll say it because I think it's important to call it out by name in case anybody is struggling with the same thing. But it was crystal methamphetamine at the time that
Mm.
that was my drug of choice, which kept me up around the clock. and it was very it's detrimental to my
Mm.
health and to my mental space. And when I finally was able to cut free of that, right, and that was kind of when I was in LA and living in my car and that kind of thing. When I was able to cut free of that, it wasn't cut and dry from that point on. There are hills and valleys to recovery, and I had not completely admitted that I was a full blown, addict or that I needed help. I just kind of was able to do it by myself and luckily
Okay.
get off of that drug.
Sure.
But through a period of time, I started drinking. There were other drugs available that I started diving into, and it took years and ups and downs. And even though I was successful holding down a job, everything seemed to be good from the outside. In fact, a lot of people didn't even realize
Mm.
that I kind of woke up, it felt like, in a full blown alcoholism where I
Mm.
was literally drinking around the clock. And, some things happened in my life. We had some deaths in the family and things that kind of exacerbated that. It kind of sped up that addiction. But it wasn't until I got to that point I realized that I needed help. But over a series of even years from that point, 4 treatment centers total, 2 rehabs, 2 treatment centers before I was able to finally wrap my head around the fact that I could no longer partake in drugs and alcohol. Like that I had an addictive personality and that I needed to stop. And so through Alcoholics Anonymous, but also as important or more important was therapy.
Mm.
I went into EMDR therapy specifically to tackle anxiety and some of the things that had crept up while I was in my addiction. And that really helped me pull out of that completely. And my anxiety, crippling anxiety that I had, where I couldn't even talk in front of people, even meet new people in a social setting, I would just start sweating, shaking to the point, and I would just have to excuse myself. I just had to leave because it was so bad. That all went away with therapy. A lot of work, but therapy.
Mm.
And once I got to that place, to answer your question, yes, I did have to pull myself out of that life, out of that immersiveness. I lived in San Francisco. We luckily had an opportunity to move to Orange County and a home there, and pulling myself out of the city and a lot of the familiar surroundings, I think, probably helped and recovery. But it didn't solve everything because I was still in my addiction when I went to Orange County. I still had troubles there. But yes, initially you do need to remove yourself from a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that. You might have to cut off some friends that are, not that may remind you of those things, or that may just be, you
Or an
realize sometimes.
environment, right, that kind of
Exactly, an
encourages certain
environment.
behavior. Yeah.
Yeah, and some it's triggers and whatnot, and then
Mm.
sometimes you realize that
Sure.
friendships were just built on
Yeah.
alcoholism or
Yeah.
addiction,
The
and that
kind
there's
of the
just no.
party friend, or
Yeah,
the
exactly.
let's do this drug friend, or
And
yeah.
so yes, initially I did have to pull myself out. Now, some of that I have been able to gradually move back into in a healthy way because I'm stronger now, and I realize that that desire as well to drink and do those things is completely gone.
Mm.
Luckily,
Mm.
I just don't have that desire anymore, and so now I can be around people who are
Yeah.
drinking or having
Yeah.
fun. In fact, it's kind of fun to be around those people because they're having fun,
You
and
can
I'm still
see what
having fun being
idiots they
sober.
become after after the three
Yeah.
Bloody Marys at brunch go down. No, just
Right. Yeah,
kidding.
exactly. So now, I really it's really freeing to be in this space where I don't have to worry about that anymore. I just kind of
Like those
it's
chains are right. I mean, I just see a
yeah,
visual like, wow, that's
right.
such an empowering
Yeah.
thing that you can share as you're doing right here. I
Yeah.
mean, somebody's going to hear that and it's like, I'm going through that too.
And for anybody that is, in addiction or recovery, I want to make it clear too. It's not completely. Everybody's got a different path, and some people, and I still have to think. I have to, stop myself from, would it be okay for me to have a margarita? Well, I know if I have one, then I would want 100, right, or more. And so, and I also no longer want that feeling that went along with all of that. So
Right.
that's the desire that went away for me, but it's not that way for everyone. So I want to make sure
Mm,
people understand that that's clear.
sure, sure.
Also,
You're not a spokesperson for
I'm not.
anybody other than yourself.
Right.
Yep. I hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I also, another thing you just reminded me of, and I want to just highlight it is the word integration. You didn't necessarily call them out, but you did. It's like, it's the therapy, it's the taking care of your health, eating
Mhm.
better,
Mhm.
exercising,
Yeah.
yoga. It's generally not a one size fits all fix, right? It's a
Right.
holistic
Yes.
integration that I think, whether it's drugs and alcohol, depression,
Mhm.
um, emotional management, right? All the
Mhm.
things that us humans get up every day and walk through, and certainly at times struggle with.
Mhm.
It's not a one size fits all, right, Jonathan?
Right.
I
Exactly
very
right.
much heard you share that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Well, we are so fortunate and lucky that you're well and healthy in here, because you've got this really dynamic, great life. And I know your husband, Brian, and those little puppies, and, just that you're living this super authentic, robust life. And congratulations on all your development and your growth in HR. And it
Thank you.
seems like, just from me looking on the outside, and,
Mm.
you just shared kind of your career, some of your career story here on this episode.
Mm.
It's kind of moved fast. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like yeah. I mean, is that
Yeah.
your perception? Like, your development, like, that's such a testament to you and who
It
you are
is.
and your work ethic and what you contribute. And
Yeah, it's funny how, as soon as, I was able to kind of get my life back together, I kind of felt like I came alive and I
Mhm.
just hit the ground running.
Yeah.
I just, all of a sudden I realized, I could be so much farther along than where I am. Let's go. Let's do it.
Well, what a message of hope and holding on.
Yeah.
Your vulnerability of sharing with our listeners straight up. I was living in my car. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I
that's
was
pretty.
homeless living in my car.
Yeah.
And here you are in these leadership roles and contributing to people's, career development, and helping them, my words, get out of their own way to do job A, B, or C, or maybe they need to get out of the job because it's not working. I mean, I can't even imagine all the hats you wear, certainly in your role and in your career, but that's a pretty big honor. That's cool.
Uh,
Well, we do close down every superpower episode, considering the things we talked about and the very deep, important, real, emotional, personal things that you shed some light on, Jonathan, about your life and your experiences. If you had to choose one superpower that you bring to your days, your weeks, your months, the world, it's a gift that you give to us and bring to the table, what would that superpower be?
well, I think, it goes along with my story, and that is just resilience, right?
Mm.
Just because I came from, and not just one dark place, but several, like I said, hills and valleys,
You're like,
right?
there were
And
a few in there.
and yeah, and just
Ugh,
keep getting up, right? And just keep getting up and keep going and find a way. And it's the will to live. And I've been lucky to have people around me that have been supportive as well. But at the end of the day, I had to do it for myself, right?
yeah.
And I had to continue fighting to live. I've lost a lot of people along the way, not just friends, just because we're not friends anymore. I'm talking about people who are dead now, people who are my
Mm,
age or younger. And that's hard to see that, that they didn't make it. But I am so thankful that I have been able to continue and that I'm still here, that I'm a survivor. So that would be my superpower, the resilience.
mm. Well, we are so grateful and thankful that you're here too. And I really, really appreciate you and everything that I get to learn from you and the examples that you lead by. So thank you so much on a personal level, Jonathan. And thank you for your vulnerability here today and sharing your story with all of our listeners.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be able to share my story. I hope that somebody got something out of it and maybe some help as well.
Thanks so much for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed it, I hope you'll make it easy for others to enjoy it too. You can do that by subscribing, writing a review, and sharing episode links with others. Then you'll be my superhero.